Sknyliv Air Show. On July 27, 2002, the deadliest air show disaster in history occurred at the Sknyliv Airfield near Lviv, Ukraine, when a Ukrainian Air Force Sukhoi Su-27UB crashed into a massive crowd of approximately 10,000 onlookers. Piloted by Volodymyr Topnar and co-piloted by Yuri Yurgorov, the aircraft was performing an aerobatic stunt as part of the Sknyliv Air Show. Both pilots had at least 27 years of cockpit experience, so the audience was expecting a stunning performance. Midway through the maneuver, the pilots lost control of the jet, which toppled to the ground right into the bystanders. After hitting the ground, it kept rolling, crashed into the nose of an Ilyushin IL-76MD transport aircraft, and then cartwheeled before becoming a blazing inferno and exploding amidst the crowd. The crash resulted, unfortunately, in the deaths of 77 people, including 28 children, and left 543 injured, with 100 of them being hospitalized. Despite the outcome, both pilots survived, though they sustained injuries. The investigation that followed identified pilot error as the primary cause of the accident, pointing to mistakes made during the maneuver. The investigation of the disaster saw a criminal trial, where both pilots were held responsible for the tragedy. Volodymyr Topnar was sentenced to 14 years in prison, but was later shortened to 3.5 years. Yuri Yurgorov received a lighter sentence of 8 years. Topnar asserted prior to his release that from the mission briefing, it was obvious that the flight parameters would exceed safe margins for the spectators. Paris Air Show. The 1973 Paris Air Show was a pivotal moment for the Soviet Union, showcasing its supersonic aircraft, the Tupolev Tu-144, to a global audience. The Tu-144 was among the first-generation supersonic transports. However, the events of June 3rd transformed what was intended as a triumphant display into a tragic incident. In front of 250,000 spectators, the test pilot Mikhail Vasilyevich Kozlov had something to prove. The Tu-144 was in fierce competition with the sleek Anglo-French Concorde, and Mikhail's confidence was high. He had boasted to onlookers, "Just wait till you see us fly." But as the Tu-144 climbed into the sky, that confidence would be put to the ultimate test. The French vehicle Concorde had already performed before the Tu-144, unable to deliver the breathtaking performance Tu-144 was giving. Everything was going according to the plan. Mikhail clearly had the upper hand. So the Tu-144 screamed across the runway, its engines roaring at full throttle as it performed one daring maneuver after another. But suddenly, after a steep, high-speed climb, disaster struck. At just 2,000 feet, the aircraft stalled and plunged into a nosedive. Mikhail tried to regain control, pulling up just 400 feet above the ground. Then, in a horrifying split second, the left wing of the Tu-144 tore away. The massive plane flipped. Within moments, the aircraft disintegrated and flaming debris rained down on the quiet town of Goussainville. The explosion destroyed homes and killed 8 civilians on the ground, including 3 children, alongside the 6 crew members aboard the Tu-144. What had started as a show of Soviet aviation skill had turned into a scene of unimaginable destruction. In the aftermath, many theories emerged. Some suggested a technical failure, while others believed that an ambitious attempt to outdo the Concorde pushed the aircraft beyond its limits. There were also claims that during the demonstration flight, the crew had to maneuver to avoid colliding with a starting plane, which contributed to the loss of control. Regardless of the true cause behind this tragic crash, it was evident that Mikhail's desire to surpass the French led him to overlook the operational boundaries and capabilities of the Tu-144. The disaster ultimately sealed the fate of the Tupolev Tu-144 development program. Reno Air Races. Recognized as the third deadliest airshow disaster of the US, the 2011 Reno Air Races were a widely anticipated event and thus had gathered thousands of spectators to watch the pilots perform elite maneuvers. The pilot, 74-year-old Jimmy Leeward, had been a common sight on the Reno racetrack since the 1980s. Despite his age, Leeward was a man filled with competitive spirit who had stepped that day onto the track to win and conquer. Leeward had placed his complete faith in the aircraft he was flying. After purchasing the plane in 1983, he named it Galloping Ghost and trusted it to be his weapon of win. Having spent considerable time and money updating and improving the jet, Leeward didn't know that his bold confidence in the vintage aircraft would soon backfire. On that faithful day while performing, Jimmy Leeward's modified P-51 Mustang Galloping Ghost suddenly pitched upward, rolled, and plummeted into the spectator stands at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. The crash resulted in the deaths of Leeward and 10 spectators, while over 69 others sustained injuries, earning it the title of Deadliest Airshow crash since 1972. Since NTSB investigators were already present on the site, the investigation began as the public was cleared, and the results were outright shocking. Their findings revealed critical mechanical failures in the Galloping Ghost, particularly concerning the left elevator trim tab. While the aircraft was modified solely to regain its prestige on the skies and at air shows, the continued modification compromised its structural integrity, ultimately resulting in a catastrophic flutter that yielded unimaginable consequences. The investigation also revealed the lock nuts on the aircraft were possibly 26 years old. The cracked and loose screw continued to worsen through the race and reached a point where it caused a massive separation in the trim lab, inviting the G-forces in that eventually knocked Leeward off. This shocking disaster led to significant changes in safety regulations. The NTSB continued an extensive investigation, resulting in the Reno Air Racing Association implementing stricter safety measures, including adjustments to racecourse layouts and increased buffer zones between spectators and aircraft. Despite the decline in participation and heightened safety concerns that followed, the event continues annually, reflecting a balance between maintaining its thrilling legacy and ensuring participant and spectator safety. Ramstein Air Base. On August 28, 1988, Ramstein Air Base welcomed approximately 300,000 spectators to watch the Flugtag 88 Air Show in Germany. The show featured various flying demonstrations and static displays from NATO member nations. The star of the show was a performance by the Italian Air Force precision aerobatic team, the Frecce Tricolori. At 3:40 p.m., as the crowd focused on the sky, disaster struck. Just 4 minutes into the demonstration, a mid-air collision occurred when one aircraft collided with another during a low-altitude crossing maneuver. The situation worsened as two stricken planes crashed onto an adjacent taxiway, one striking a U.S. Army UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. The initial aircraft erupted into flames, cartwheeling across the runway and into the crowd, leaving debris behind and coming to rest against an ice cream truck. The toll was devastating. 3 Italian pilots died, with one failing to eject safely. On the ground, 67 spectators, including many Germans, lost their lives, while 346 others suffered serious injuries. Office of Special Intelligence Agents processed over 3,000 inquiries from the concerned families in the days following the crash, and revealed that not only was there pilot error and miscommunication among the flight, but the flight parameters also exceeded the aircraft's capabilities. Also, the air traffic control measures were found inadequate for the event's scale, failing to ensure real-time coordination among the aircrafts, ultimately claiming multiple lives. Some even argued that if the airshow had taken place in the US, it would have saved a lot of damages since the FAA would have prevented the jet from performing right above the onlookers. Following the oversight of regulations and the devastating consequences, the West German government banned all air shows. And it wasn't until 2012 in Berlin that strict maneuvers were once again allowed to be performed. Shoreham Airshow. On August 22, 2015, during the Shoreham Airshow in UK, a spectacular display turned into a tragedy when a vintage Hawker Hunter jet plummeted from the sky. At 1:22 p.m., while attempting an ambitious aerobatic loop, the jet failed to level off and crashed onto the busy A27 road below. Cars and motorcycles were caught in the horrific impact, killing 11 people instantly while 16 were left injured. Miraculously, the pilot Andy Hill survived the fiery wreckage with severe injuries, though the loss of lives was overwhelming. The Hawker Hunter, a relic of 1950s aviation, had departed from North Weald Airfield, flying with a display routine that should have wowed the crowds. However, a combination of low engine thrust and insufficient speed during the loop spelled disaster. Investigators later pointed out that Hill had failed to initiate an escape maneuver in time, raising questions about his training for such life-or-death situations. The crash shook the airshow world, leading to stricter rules on vintage aircraft performances and grounding all UK hawk hunters indefinitely. Although charged with 16 counts of manslaughter in 2018, Hill was acquitted a year later, arguing that high G-forces impaired his control in those crucial moments before the crash. Sacramento Airshow. On September 24, 1972, another catastrophic incident claimed the skies, this time involving the Canadair Sabre Mk5 fighter jet, piloted by Richard L. Bingham during the Golden West Sport Aviation Air Show at Sacramento Executive Airport in California. As the jet attempted to take off around 4:25 p.m., it failed to gain sufficient altitude, over-rotating its nose, which was a known handling characteristic of the F-86. The aircraft overran the runway, hit the earthen berm, and broke through a chain-link fence. Upon impact, the external fuel tank ruptured, creating a massive fireball as the jet collided with a moving car and crashed into a Farrell's ice cream parlor at approximately 150 miles per hour. Tragically, the crash claimed the lives of 22 individuals, including 12 children, and left 28 others injured, including Bingham himself, who suffered serious injuries. The National Transportation Safety Board determined that pilot error due to Bingham's inexperience was the main factor. This tragedy led to stricter regulations for ex-military jets operating over populated areas and initiated the creation of the Firefighters Burn Institute, funded by local firefighters. Legal consequences followed, resulting in numerous lawsuits and a settlement totaling $5 million. In 2002, a memorial was erected at the crash site to honor the victims and ensure that the tragic event is not forgotten. Ostend Airshow. On July 26, 1997, just 5 minutes into its flight at the Ostend Airport Airshow in Belgium, a single-seater Royal Jordanian Falcon Extra 300 crashed near the crowd at around 3:50 p.m. The aircraft was part of a competition for the Mission Impossible trophy, showing the best aerobatic skills. It was operated by Captain Omar Hani Bilal, who was a captain of the Jordanian Air Force display team. Captain Bilal was known for his exceptional flying skills and had participated in numerous international air shows, earning respect among peers for his talent and experience. While performing low-altitude spins, the pilot, a stand-in for the scheduled performer, encountered sudden gusts that caused the plane to lose speed. In a desperate attempt to regain control, the aircraft dove vertically but failed to pull up in time. The crash resulted in the deaths of 9 people and injuries to 37 others, with 10 in critical condition. Among the deceased were spectators who traveled from various countries to witness the event, highlighting the tragic impact of the accident on the international aviation community. Eyewitnesses described horrific scenes, including the pilot found partially out of the burning wreckage. Emergency responders arrived on the scene within minutes, but the chaotic environment made rescue efforts challenging. This tragedy raised significant concerns about safety measures at air shows, particularly regarding audience placement during high-risk maneuvers, leading to calls for stricter regulations and pilot training to prevent similar incidents in the future. In the aftermath, discussions on airshow safety protocols intensified, emphasizing the need for better communication and contingency planning for performers and organizers alike. Farnborough Airfield. On the afternoon of September 6, 1952, over 120,000 people gathered at the Farnborough Airfield in Hampshire, England, watching with excitement as the de Havilland DH-110 flew through the skies. Piloted by the renowned John Derry, the aircraft performed a series of stunts. Alongside him was flight test observer Anthony Richards. The two had already achieved remarkable victories in aviation, but on this day, their mission would end in a catastrophe. The DH-110 began a steep climb, reaching speeds of over 500 miles per hour. But as Derry pulled into the left bank, hell broke loose. The aircraft broke apart mid-air. The wreckage fell straight into the crowd, and the 2 massive jet engines crashed like missiles toward the spectators. 29 innocent people on the ground were killed, and another 60 were injured. Among them were families, children, and aviation enthusiasts who had come to witness unique engineering only to find themselves in the heart of a deathly tragedy. As for Derry and Richards, they too were lost, their lives extinguished in the same split-second failure that claimed so many others. Despite the devastation, the air show did not stop. Just hours later, other pilots continued their demonstrations. In the days that followed, the investigation revealed a critical design flaw in the plane's wing's leading edge, which had only 64% of the intended structural strength. This flaw tragically led to the mid-air breakup. All DH-110s were initially grounded. The Farnborough disaster led to stricter safety regulations at air shows across the UK. But for those who were there, no new rule could erase the dark memory of that fateful day in September. Fairchild Air Force Base. In 1994, Fairchild Air Force Base B-52 crash is one of the most disastrous examples of leadership failure and disregard for safety protocols in military history. On June 24, 1994, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bud Holland, known for pushing the limits of flight regulations, took off in a B-52 Stratofortress, call sign Caesar 52, for a training exercise. With Lieutenant Colonel Mark McGeehan, Colonel Robert Wolfe, and Lieutenant Colonel Ken Houston on board, the crew planned an ambitious series of maneuvers with demanding low-altitude passes, bank turns, and climbs, all as a practice for an upcoming airshow demonstration flight. Then, ignoring the bank and pitch limit of the aircraft, Holland attempted an unauthorized 360-degree turn at just 250 feet above the ground. As the plane banked past 90 degrees, it stalled and crashed, killing all 4 crew members. The crash was primarily caused by reckless disregard for aviation regulations, the persistent failure of U.S. Air Force leaders to recognize systemic flaws, and the poorly managed sequence of events during the aircraft's final flight. The Air Force's investigation uncovered a troubling pattern of ignoring unsafe practices, insufficient mission oversight, and inadequate disciplinary measures. Superiors had never grounded or seriously reprimanded Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bud Holland despite his numerous prior violations, including reckless flying during air shows and training missions. Had there been better military flight safety regulations and stricter accountability in the chain of command, the crash that claimed the lives of 4 experienced pilots could have been probably prevented.